So for today's craft, we're going to be doing version number 2 of this packable adjustable sun visor. Today I wore this to play tennis and it works super well, but I did have some things I do want to change and work on. So where I play tennis, it's windy sometimes, and so I have a problem of like my hat blowing off, and this happens to like all different hats, baseball hats, other visors. The one that I showed you also is too big, like the wind catches under it or something and it flies off. This one, it stayed on for most of the time, but there were big gusts of wind, it did fly off, or when I was running quickly to the ball, it flew off. And I mean, that happens, but I want to minimize that. And I thought of a couple of things that I can do. And also I figured out how to make it reversible. So I'm going to try that. So the adjustments I'm going to make is I'm going to make it a little bit smaller. So maybe 1 inch smaller, because it was perfectly fine before how I had it. But for playing sports or, running or anything, being in the wind, you want to make it tight on your head. So when I wanted to make it tight, instead of wearing it like that, I had to cross it over. So I could spare to lose like maybe like 2 inches actually. I also have to shorten it because I'm going to use ties. Like instead of Velcro, I think I'm going to have ties on the back. 2 strings, and then you tie it close. And I want to try that. I have never tried that on a hat so far. So that'll be a good, test. If that doesn't work, or if it's too cumbersome, like you don't want to be tying it all the time. If Velcro is better, then I'll just switch to Velcro. But I do want to just experiment with the ties. But yeah, the ties can't cross over. That's the only thing. So it has to be smaller. So right now I have it marked to shorten the whole hat by 1 inch because this is half. This is a fold line, and I'm a little worried about taking off too much from the front because then this part is shortened. Maybe it's better if I take off 1 inch from here and a little bit from the sides. And then, when you have like lengthen and shorten lines on patterns, it's not always at the fold line. A lot of the times it's like at the natural waistline of the garment, and then you have to fold it up to shorten the torso. It's similarly like that, I think. So let's fold it in. So I'm going to fold this up to this 1/2 inch line, and maybe I'll just tape it. I always have some washi tape in my sewing kit. Okay, and then let's fold this one, the 1/2 inch. That way when I take it off, it doesn't ruin the pattern. Okay, where is that line right there? Okay, and then so for the ties, I'm just going to use this chin strap from the other hat, the juniper hat. Just going to cut 2 pieces of this, and I think this will be long enough. And this is going to be like bias tape, so it's actually going to be a pretty narrow tie. And that's what I kind of want, something dainty on the back. You could go for like a big bow, but just for this trowel, I'm going to just use this. I think that would be good because the more narrow the tie, I think you can get a tighter or more secure tie, right? Versus a big tie. So I'm just going to go ahead and cut that out. I'm going to be using the exact same materials as I did last time, just to keep it kind of like consistent, and then we can, judge from there. So I have my canvas, my cotton canvas, and my cotton lining fabric. I'm going to cut the ties out of the lining because I think it looks cuter. And this time it's going to be reversible, so I don't have to like worry too much that I want the cute pattern as the outside. Another thing I'm going to do is I'm going to interface it with heavyweight interfacing. So this was the medium weight, right? Last time I was too impatient. I didn't wait for the heavyweight, and when the wind blew, sometimes it blew in my eye, and that was not good because I missed the ball. But I think a heavier weight brim will be good. I'm also going to do the heavyweight interfacing for the side panel, And also another thing I'm thinking about is, you know how I use the band roll in here, the 1.5 inch waistband interfacing. Instead of sewing it into I sewed it into this seam. Instead of doing that, I'm going to do the heavyweight interfacing, and I'm going to just try to slip it in as like a loose piece, because I think that would work, you know? And then it wouldn't be so like, sorry, there's makeup on it because I did wear it today. It wouldn't like kind of wrinkle here because, you know, it's this flimsy fabric and then something so stiff. I think, yeah, I'm going to try to let it be loose in here. Of course, I'm going to sew it at the ends to, you know, hold it together, but it will be loose. And let's just see what happens. I'm just going to shorten the piece by 1/4 inch all the way around on the top. So yeah, please let me know if you tried this hat, the first version, or if you make this version. I'm so curious and I want to know how it's working for you and if, you know, you're enjoying it, or did you make any changes to your pattern? So I'm going to take off the 1/4 inch from the top of the hat. Okay, so let me just cut out my fabrics and interfacing and we'll start sewing. So as I'm cutting out my lining, I also want to remind you guys to clip your center markings on the bottom and the top. And also if you're using a directional fabric, don't forget to kind of align your fabrics up. So for me, I'm trying to match up this flower in the center, and then there's two different type of flowers. So I'm trying to make sure this flower kind of matches up with this one. I'm really new to like, I'm trying to get better at rotary or using the rotary cutter. Sometimes I cut my pattern, like because I'm just pressing too hard or something. Maybe you're not supposed to use it on carpet. That's probably one thing. Not have your board on carpet because it's not enough pressure for the floor. Yeah, so I'm tracing it out first and then adding some pins and then cutting it out. So maybe if you're using a rotary cutter, I do think it does help with the curves, like getting a nice clean cut, and it works super well on thin fabrics. I was having more of a problem with the cotton canvas because it wasn't going through the 2 layers. Also scared of cutting myself because I heard it really hurts when you cut yourself with the rotary cutter. But I do want to get better because it does cut out curves just so much better. But I always get like a few of these that don't cut all the way through. If you have any rotary cutter tips, please let me know. Besides the obvious ones that I just mentioned. I think I just have to go on the hardwood floor maybe. And so this piece, don't forget to mark the center markings. It'll really help you out later. For the ties with the directional fabric, I guess I would want it to go. So just going to cut out 2 pieces of this and then we can start sewing. Okay, so I have all my pieces cut out and I'm going to iron on my interfacing. I made a small mistake when I cut out the interfacing. The roll that I'm using is this super huge roll, and I'll link it down below. I forgot what the name of the company is, but this is a heavyweight interfacing, and this is the texture of it. You can see it's pretty stiff. It's not plasticky feeling, but it's definitely more plasticky than like medium weight interfacing. It does still have a sticky side, which is like this shiny side, and the regular side. So this is the glue side. Usually interfacing it's bumpy, but this one is smooth. So when I cut out the piece for the brim, the roll is not wide enough to cut it in one continuous circle. And last time I got the pattern piece and I just cut like 1/4 inch more. I forgot to do that this time. I don't know why. So, but I did like that having that little overlap. It actually made it more stable in the front. And since I forgot to do it this time, I just cut it on the fold. So you see how there'll be a little gap or a little fold right here. And I think that will make it fold naturally. And I don't want that. Like it would be a permanent crease in the hat. So I'm going to put a piece here just to stabilize it. I don't think it's gonna make a difference. Like it's not gonna make it any more firm or make it stick out or anything. It'll be fine. Okay, so I'm just gonna iron on all of this interfacing. Actually, one more thing. I want to reduce the bulk on this part of the hat. You know, actually, maybe I will keep it. Usually I trim off this like a centimeter from the inner portion of the hat to make it more not so stiff at this joint right here. Maybe I will because I don't want it to be all bulky at this seam. I do want it to be stiff here and stiff here, but not like bulky right here. So I think I will cut off at the centimeter. So just put your piece together this way. And let's just trim a centimeter. And I don't do that for the outer seam because I want it to have more of a stable shape. Not just for the inner seam. I want it to be a little more flexible so it looks better. So let's just line this up again. So let's just tack this one down. I have my Cricut Easy Press Mini. I should use the big iron and then this will be a lot faster of a process, but I'm too lazy to get it out. So I'm just gonna use this. I'm just holding it down for about 5 seconds each area at the highest heat. So I'm just going to continue pressing and come back. If when you're ironing on your interfacing, you have like little bits that, you know, didn't match up for some reason, just trim it to match your fabric so it doesn't throw you off while sewing later. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is sew our brim to our side panel. And we're just going to lay the brim upright, have your side panel upright, and then just look for one side is, you know, narrower or shorter than the other. So just make sure you're lining it up like this and then folding it down. And then you can match it up at the center seam. Sometimes it's hard to see because we put the interfacing, but it's right here to this notch. And we're just going to start pinning around. And it may be a little difficult because of the interfacing is pretty stiff, but just use as many pins as you need. Just like in the other hat videos, there will be times where I'm just going to sew over the pins, and I don't recommend it. You shouldn't, because you could like mess up your machine, break a needle, all that stuff. But for me, it's sometimes I need to just sew over it just so that the fabric doesn't move, and just because it's like on a curve. Some people also like to clip their material a little bit before. I like to clip after because I don't know exactly how I'm sewing. Hopefully straight, but you know, what if you have like the cut in your seam where you're stitching, and then that's not good, right? So pin it to the very edge. My edges don't match up, and that's fine. We'll fix it later. It's better for this part to be a little over than under. I'm finding that the side panel naturally wants to curve inward, and so we're just going to match the brim to the side panel. And then we're going to go ahead and do this for the solid hat too. What should I call it? Because it's not inner and outer anymore, because it's reverse, we're going to be reversible. But yeah, the solid color. So we're going to pin that. And while we're there, we should also just do our ties. I don't like to be fiddling around with pulling the ties out, especially if it's a tie. So I'm just going to do it so we sew it and it's done, you know. Sometimes people make the tube and then turn it right side out. I just want to sew it straight. And I guess it also depends on your sewing machine. Some machines will have a hard time sewing something really skinny, but I'm going to try. So I'm folding it in half. I turned it under maybe like a 1/4 of an inch, folding it in half, and then I'm going to fold it to the center. Okay, and then I'm going to put it together. And then we're just going to sew at a top stitch all the way down. Okay, and just do this for the other tie also. Okay, so I'm at my Brother SE 2000, and I have my My needle sets to where I can sew a 1/2 inch seam allowance, and I have my stitch length at 2.5 millimeter. So it's up to you which side you want up. I like to have the ruffly side up, I think, just so that I can make adjustments to the material easy. But up to you, whatever you feel most comfortable with. Things to look out for are you just don't want to have little folds like that. If you need to ease the tension and fix that before, just go ahead and lift your presser foot up and adjust as needed, because those folds will show on the outside when you turn it right side out. Okay, so we're going to do that for the other side too. And then for the little straps, I'm going to start on the side that's folded. And for this one, I'm going to change my stitch length to 4 millimeters because it's kind of like a top stitch. So I'm just going really slowly so that I make sure I can catch both layers of the material. I also have my walking foot on, and that sometimes helps with these fiddlier fabrics, like getting it started. Sometimes your machine wants to eat the fabric up. So it wasn't perfect, but that's fine. So yeah, just go ahead and sew the other 2 pieces and we'll meet back at the table. Okay, for the interface brim, I am having like a kind of a harder time with this one. I'm finding I have to kind of really hold down the ruffly part over here to make it not fold and sew nicely. So I'll show you what I mean. Oops. Like this big fold right here, I have to kind of like make it into 2 little folds so that it's sewable, I guess, or not getting all bunched up. If I do that though, like separate this fold into like 2 smaller folds, it really helps. Okay, so now for our inner and outer or printed and solid parts of the hats, I'm just going to clip around. That way it'll fall nicer. And then when I clip, it's just going to be like maybe every 2 inches at a diagonal and 1 or 2 millimeters away from the actual stitch. Okay, now we're going to press our seam allowances up into the side panel. So turn your iron back on. I'm still trying to think if we're going to add in the band roll or not. It seems like this is going to be stiff enough where we don't really have to. So I'm going to put my brim right side up, and then we're just going to iron from the outside in, and might want to use some seam. That way you're pushing out the seam and also pressing it up. You can check for any like little folds in the brim that you can fix now if you want, whereas later on you can't. I'm definitely happy that I cut that 1 centimeter off from the inner part of the inner facing. It would be super stiff and hard right now to work with if I didn't. So my dilemma right now is if I add in the band roll, it might be a little difficult to do the top stitching right here. Like in my other one, I top stitched really nicely on the outside, but the inner side, the top stitching didn't go so well. I mean, it was okay, but sometimes it was on the side panel, sometimes it was on the brim, and that's just the nature of like sewing through the whole thing. So this time, I think I'm just going to top stitch this portion now separately. so that it looks neat because it's going to be reversible. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. I'm going to top stitch on the side panel side 1/8 of an inch away from the seam. Okay, I finished top stitching both my pieces, and for this piece I have to warn you, I think you're going to have to use like a denim needle. A universal regular needle may or may not cut it for you. One other tip is that you should press it really flat, like this seam really flat, because I did get some like skip stitches like right there and right here, and I seam ripped it like twice because it kept happening. And so I was looking at why this would happen, and one, my needle may have been dull and I was sewing over the needles, right? And two, I think it was just too thick with like the 2 layers of the interfacing plus 1, 2, 3 layers of fabric. So I did need to use a heavier weight needle. Press it super flat, because if it's kind of popping up here and then there's space between here and here, that's another way that you'll get a skip stitch. So now they look nice from both sides. I decided that I'm not going to use the band roll for this hat because I feel like it's going to be pretty stiff. And also, with me top stitching both sides, there's not going to be a channel per se for the band roll to be in here. I could go ahead and sew it to the top though, like in this stitch. The good thing about the band roll is that it does keep it pretty, you know, stiff up here, and it does help with the rolling and unrolling of it. Although I worn and like kind of tossed this one around, and it's a little bit wrinkly right here. Like even the band roll part got a little wrinkled. So I don't know. Maybe we'll try without it and then see if we don't have to put it, because that is just an extra, you know, item. So for now, we're going to put right sides together and we're going to trim. So from here to here, I want to trim off the excess. So the main part is I'm matching up this curve. And then matching up the 2 bottoms of here. And then we're going to trim. So this is a center point. There's like a little notch right there. Okay, and I guess we can go all the way around. We need to insert our ties before we go ahead and sew. So let's look for the raw side of the tie. And I want to have like the seam side facing down. That's, I guess, the usual. And I'm just going to put it in the middle of the band right here. And we'll go ahead and pin it. Also making sure this part matches up. And then pin the curve. Okay, so one side we're going to leave open so that we can turn it right side out. There's some things I want to mark. I want to mark 1/2 inch away from here because that's going to be how we're going to turn it in. We don't want to sew over this 1/2 inch mark. And we're not going to sew from here. I think last time I left 3 inches and it was a little bit hard. I think this time, you know, I could probably actually do the turnout from here and then be able to sew the curve, because it was a little hard to turn under everything. Let's try that. Then we can pin this too. Okay, so we're gonna leave the outside open. How about 6 inches? So we're not gonna sew from here to here, but we are going to start sewing from here. So we're going to put in our tie. So this is the raw end and the seam is facing down. Put it in the middle, making sure it's going straight this way, not angling down or anything like that. Yeah, I think that'll be easier because it would be really hard to like top stitch there from after everything's turned right side out. Okay, so I'm going to start sewing from here all the way to here, leaving that 6 inch opening at a 1/2 inch seam allowance. and I'm going to sew it at a 2.5mm stitch. And I think I'm going to back stitch over here on top of the ties on both sides, just for added support. Okay, so now we're going to clip all the way around, same little notches, and at the corners like this one we're going to cut a diagonal off. For this one I'm also going to cut a diagonal just to help us out a little bit later. Okay, and let's turn this right side out. Like the easiest way I found is like to pull the canvas part out through the top. So you kind of like shove it in from the bottom and then pull it out from the top. Yeah, this is way easier. Last time I did a 3-inch hole and that was just not enough. Too much struggling. If I made a lot of these hats, I would definitely want the larger turnout hole. And while we're waiting, I'm going to heat up my iron. It's okay if the brim gets wrinkled or the lining part gets wrinkled. We can iron out the wrinkles. Now we can get a chopstick, and like a blunt chopstick, and reach in and we can poke out the very corner. Just make it really neat so we can press it. See this corner up here above the tie, and then you can either use your finger or use a chopstick to kind of help open up the seam all the way around and then finger press it. Okay, this is going to be actually way easier to do with your hand. If you have a small enough hand, you can just stick your hand in there. And the top portion also. So because this is a reversible hat, we're going to want to make sure that neither side is sticking out on the other when you're, looking at it from the top. So that's a little bit trickier definitely than having one designated top side. Okay, so we're going to spray. It's also easier for my hands to kind of manipulate the fabric when it's wet. Here, I'll do the outer brim first. Okay, and then when we come to the opening, we're going to want to turn it in 1/2 inch. I'm going to just, make it as neat as possible and match it to the lining. I think this part might be a little tricky because it has all the bulk right here, but just try to get it in there. And this is probably the only place we need to really pin. Okay, so now we're going to top stitch all the way around, and I guess start from here and then just go around at a 1/8 seam allowance all the way back. Okay, so this is what it looks like, and I have to say it's not perfect. I don't know what it is about my machine right now, but it's skipping some stitches. Like right here, it skipped the stitch, but I don't want to. I think I know what it is. It's because the thread is too light. If I use like a top stitching thread, which I do have, but I don't have a matching color right now. So yeah, I don't think the thread can handle the really thick parts. I did not have any of these problems like when I used the medium weight interfacing. So this is just a heavyweight interfacing kind of problem. If you use something lighter, it's okay. But yeah, just where it's really thick, it did skip. Since I don't have like the right color top stitching thread, we can't really fix that at the moment. And I do want to just try this on and see if this worked. Just going to press my brim out, pressing both sides because this side has the interfacing part, and I don't know, it looks better when you press this side. Okay, other than that, let's go and try this on. Okay, so sorry, I did come from tennis. or I played tennis this morning. So let's try this on. So this is what it looks like. I'm gonna tie this. And yeah, it's a lot stiffer. It was pretty easy to tie in the back of my head. I can tell the brim is a little bit shorter because I can see more of my hair on the top. Maybe I should try the other one on for you too, but this is it. And then to show you the other side. So yeah, I think it looks pretty good. So let's try with a ponytail and making it tight. So I just have these like pro hair ties, that's what it's called, that I love. They're silicone and grippy because my hair is really heavy and doesn't like to stay up. So like this morning, it was just not like tight enough for me with the Velcro, I think. So I will try to make this one extra tight in the back. So I think I have it all the way tied. And then let me know, do you think this small tie is good or would it look better with like a bigger ribbon? So yeah, that feels pretty secure. I will have to try and wear this to tennis again to like really, you know, let you know how it performed. Yeah, I think this like will work really well. It's not as flimsy or, you know, when the wind blows, it'll go back up versus like stay here. Yeah, let me go get the other one. Okay, so in comparison, this is the other one. This one is not reversible. So it has the Velcro in the back. And do you think this part is better, wider or smaller like the other one? You see this one, it's, if you plop it down, it kind of stays down. It's definitely a lot floppier. Still cute with the lining on the inside though, I like that. Okay, back to this one. See how much more of my hair you can see, which I don't think it's a bad thing. It's just, that's how it is. I have hats that are wider up here and narrower. It really just, I definitely think this is like a better version. The band over here is a lot smoother because it doesn't have the band roll like where you can obviously see it, especially from the inside. So maybe it's better to not have that piece. And the heavyweight interfacing is sufficient enough to make it stand and be, you know, not slouchy up here. So if you want, you could keep the original length and just use the heavyweight interfacing. Yeah, I think the brim is a definite improvement. It kind of also just like protects more when it's not floppy, you know, it has more sun coverage. Let's try the wrapping up of it. So all you would do is just roll the hat up like this. And then I would just get like my hair tie. See, so this hair tie, you just unclip it and it comes out. No pulling your hair out, and then you just clip it again. The bad thing is that my hair is really heavy and stuff, so these don't last super long. Like I'll probably use this one for like 2 months and then I'll have to like, it'll either like, these little balls will come off because I'm stretching it so much, and then I'll just cut it down and then cut it down. And eventually when I can't get it on my wrist anymore, then I'll just throw it away and use another one. So the way I would keep it in my bag is I would just have my hair tie and put it around here. And then that way you have your hair tie and your hat at the same time. But yeah, I will use this for tennis next week and then let you guys know how it did. I can already tell already though that the brim will be a lot better for sure. Yeah, so thanks for watching. Hope you like this packable, adjustable, reversible sun visor, and I'll see you in my next video.